This is a video about my Turbo Valiant build. There's no turbo yet. This is the build. It's going to be a series of videos where I put this thing together. In this video, I answer many comments. Questions like, why would you use EFI? And that sort of thing. Also, toward the end of this video, I might end up completely deranged and this entire project goes off the rails. Something about inhaling a bunch of gas vapors. It gets fun, I think. Yes. Time to make the Signet slightly less ugly. Slightly. Just another beautiful day in Middle Earth under the watchful eye of Sauron. Before. Oh yeah. This is gonna be amazing. Or at least less awful. Two-Face. That's where the flavor's hiding. Dude, look at it. It's so fine. Yeah, it's fine. Couldn't call it great. I'd hesitate to even call it good, but it's fine. I do love that patina flavor. I am somewhat confused by it though. You see, there's red paint sticking through the white in a bunch of places. That A-pillar, this door, both C-pillars, and it's not present everywhere. Like the trunk lid doesn't show any at all. That's it, baby. Let it all out. Anyway, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and I've got a funny story for you. And it's, this. Yeah. Let me explain. This 1963 Valiant Signet, much like many other vehicles that have been featured on the channel over the last year or so, came from the estate of Dave Wren. Dave Wren was a somewhat famous and, well, maybe infamous Pacific Northwest Mopar drag racer. Dave was a pretty hardcore drag racer and Mopar collector, and maybe hoarder, for decades. He was well known for being a great driver, for coming in like second or third at many national events, and for being a little on the cheap side, which personally I can appreciate. My Ram truck actually came from Dave Wren's collection as well. And after seeing the way it was put together, well, one might conclude that a little on the cheap side is a bit of an understatement, but that's another story. Dave left behind a bunch of trucks, a bunch of cool race cars, and a ton of Mopar project vehicles. 50s, early 60s for the most part. And Tom Hergert with Rocket Restorations bought a whole bunch of them. This is one of many that he brought home from Dave's place. This Valiant was not the only early A-body. It wasn't even the only white two-door early 60s Slant 6 equipped Valiant. The other one was a 65, which went to follower, subscriber, and live stream participant Robert Fitch. Holy crap, I just realized I never plugged in the oxygen sensor. So many things are starting to make sense. Anyway, the 65 Valiant, which Robert ended up buying, had what I believe was a later, maybe mid-70s Slant 6 under the hood, and it had a Super 6 intake manifold. This car, of course, did not have a Super 6 setup, but it did have this air cleaner, which says Charger 225. Of course, if I'd been thinking, I would have realized that's a Dodge air cleaner. The long and the short is, I decided / assumed this was a 225 that I was about to be slapping a turbo on. And I told the little computer thingy that it is too. Earlier today though, I came to a realization while showing this thing off to my neighbor. He asked how big the engine was and I said, oh, it's a 225 Slant 6. Then I got to looking at it and I found the thing that makes it quite obvious it's not. That bypass hose. On the 225 Slant 6 and the 198, the deck height is raised. That's the cylinder head mounting surface. It ends up farther away from the crankshaft. So, the hose that connects the cylinder head to the water pump has to be longer. That little bypass hose in there on a 225 is something like 2.5 inches long. On the 170, which is what we're looking at here, it's like 1.5 inches. Now, there's no displacement cast into the side of this block like on the V8s. There is a casting number right there, 2463230. I couldn't find a really good listing of all of the numbers, so I just punched it into the Google. Yep, that's a 170. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. The 170 has a shorter stroke, which means it might lend itself to higher RPM abuse. Smaller engine definitely qualifies as more of a challenge, so it'll be interesting to see what happens here. I am committed to boosting it at this point. I was strongly considering kicking the 225 Slant block from Dylan's Dart Sport here into the scrap pile, but maybe I will hang on to that. Anyway, with this newfound knowledge, I'm gonna break the controller trying to do this with one hand. And then I'm gonna go in here, change the displacement to 170, check the fuel pressure, and then proceed from that point. It's called optimism. All right, come on. Oh, that's too much. Fire in the hole. Okay. I still haven't plugged the temp sensor. I really need to do that. Apparently I got pretty close on the fuel pressure. Remind me to get an electronic voltage regulator. Oh, also a bigger alternator. Well, okay, it sounds happier. Oh, also the coolant leaks. This is becoming a problem. Under acceleration, the pressure goes as high as 50 psi. So I probably will dial that regulator down a little bit. What's that horrible noise? So I guess it's got a giant vacuum leak because the idle valve is fully shut and so is the throttle. All right, I'm gonna go jump off the bridge now. I pulled the whole throttle body to check the base gasket and it seems to be just fine. I'm totally sure this is a manifold issue or a me issue at this point. And I have to say, the atomic, super easy to just pop off and there's no gas pouring everywhere. I like that. I think my next move is probably to rig up some kind of plate so I can pressurize this intake and check for leaks. Rats. I see you. Another trunk full of money. Delightful. Let's introduce some science. The carb hole or the EFI hole or whatever is plugged with a plate. Admittedly, it's a little warped, so it's probably not a perfect seal, but I've got this air blower thingy rigged up to a hose, rigged up to a nipple, and let's see what happens. Hey, what's that sound? Okay, I think I figured it out. It's actually two things. I sealed this crappy gasket around the exhaust port, but apparently not around the intake port. That was dumb. But the other thing is this. This port, what originally housed the middle bolt for the exhaust manifold connection, which broke, that is underneath the carb spacer, and there's nothing fully enclosing it. So there's actually a gap, and so that is a vacuum leak. Now, of course, I don't need this bolt anymore. I'm going to be completely eliminating that section of the replacement exhaust manifold eventually. So all I'm going to do is tap this and put a pipe plug in it, and that should work fine. Do that, reseal the plate, put it all back together, and hopefully it will finally run okay. You may recall in the last video, I jammed all this full of weld, and in the doing, I gave an actual welder an absolute coronary. Anyway, I missed some spots, and so there's still a whole bunch of soot, and that's not ideal. I'm probably gonna touch that up a little bit while I'm here. Why not? And then I'm gonna do totally the wrong thing, and I'm gonna jam this crack full of weld. Again, it's already been done once, and it didn't work, so it probably won't work the second time either. And while I'm in here, I'm gonna go ahead and silicone the intake ports. Eventually, I'll replace this gasket. Dang, I'm good. I gooped some more crappy welds on the exhaust manifold. Just don't look at those. They might work, maybe. If it makes like 3% less exhaust noise, I will be pleased. Okay, that fixed it. Except, somehow, there's vacuum into that opening. And I don't know why that is. There really shouldn't be. Anyway, I guess I'm gonna fill that with silicone and hopefully that'll work. I can't really get to that to thread it and plug it, and I've already reinstalled the manifold, so yeah, I don't have a whole lot of interest left in taking it back off. Yeah, that's it. Other than that, it seems to mostly hold air now. I think the rest of that's going through the engine. While I'm here, I'm gonna make a move that's gonna confuse and infuriate some. Recall, this starter has made horrible noises like from day one. Honestly, it might have just been the positive connection here, which despite having been tightened before, still not tight. Anyway, I'm doing the old school starter sound delete. The modern gear reduction starter is, well, a better starter, but also it's physically smaller and the motor is clocked in a different direction. And I have it on authority from other people who have done this swap. Yeah, this has been done before, just FYI. Anyway, apparently swapping to the mini starter makes a good bit more room when you're putting the turbo here. And that's what I'm gonna do. In case you're not hip to it, this is essentially the factory starter from a late 80s and newer Ram truck or Dakota, Durango, etc. They're made by Nip and Denso, but they fit right where the old starter did. And there it is installed. It's as simple as just bolting it in. Although let it be noted, on the Slant 6, it's tilted that way somewhat, so the power feed wire and the trigger wire did not reach. I had to remake those. They were both kind of fried anyway, so there you go. All right, it's back together, and I've got like 11 minutes to get to my live stream, so let's find out if this works. Note, I came up with a crazy concoction of a T and a pipe nipple and an adapter to connect the temp sensor. I don't know how well that's going to work because it's that far up and there isn't much of an opening through that adapter. Big money. Oh. Aw. I might have to adjust the throttle now. Doesn't it just sound wrong? Well, it still has horrible exhaust leaks, but it sure sounds better, doesn't it? Oh, come on. Okay. Yeah, I think the silicone job held, kinda. It sure isn't gonna hold under boost, so I guess I'll be fixing that in the future. Oh, that's funny. Now that we actually have a little bit of vacuum, the fuel pressure has dropped a lot. Yeah, that still seems like a lot of fuel. I'm seeing it go as high as 53 PSI when I rev the engine. It's super lean. Why is it so lean? Yeah, I don't actually think that temp sensor position works at all. It's barely come up, and well, I can feel heat in the heater hoses, so yeah. Okay, it's better. There's no question it's better. But there's plenty of work left here to do. Oh, in case you were wondering, that throttle body is capable of like 900 CFM, which in theory is a lot for this thing, but because it's so tunable, it should be just fine once I get everything dialed. Yeah, it's super rich. At least it smells like it is. And that's at like 3% injector duty cycle, it said? That's not very much. Yeah, 3%. Injector duty cycle is essentially how much of the time the injector is open. That seems super low for the amount of rich this thing smells right now, so maybe those injectors are too big for a 170 cubic inch engine, I don't know. What I do know is, once again, I'm gonna be late for my live stream. It's a new day, and I'm going to take a break from wrenching to explain some things. You see, on the first video on this car, I got lots and lots of comments. In the first video, I recommended that you go back and watch my original video on the Turbo Slant setup because I covered most of the details there. It has occurred to me that most people aren't going to do that, and most of my viewers now were not around a year and a half ago when I did the first installment, so I'm going to cover them again here. I'm turboing a Slant 6 because I really like the Slant 6, even though it's gutless. They're cool, it's an interesting platform, and I want to do something with one that involves some horsepower. I have plenty of V8s in other cars. Like, I got lots. So yeah, we're not V8 swapping the 63. The entire point is to do something a little bit different and interesting. I am an old school carburetor guy. I love simple and easy to tune and fix on the side of the road. And in 9 out of 10 cases, maybe 9.9 out of 10 cases, I'm going to go with a carburetor. In fact, an Edelbrock is my favorite, and that's normally what I would go with. I'm using this MSD Atomic EFI system because Slant 6 engine and boost. It's an interesting combination, and I like the idea of having a computer to help tune it. This thing will respond easily to boost changes, and that's what I want. I twisted the EFI throttle body mounting at this 45-degree angle because the way I made this intake was I plopped a 4-barrel spacer down on the aluminum 1-barrel manifold and figured this was the only way I could mount it that made sense. If it was this way, none of the ports would have aligned with those middle 2 cylinders, and I was afraid they would end up starved. I don't think this setup would be a good idea for a carburetor. The 1 barrel ends up just feeding those cylinders, and I feel like the signals would be strange. I'm hopeful that the EFI system will not have those issues, so we'll see what happens. And if this works well, you are more than welcome to follow the path I'm blazing. If it doesn't work well, we'll all find out together. And the way we'll find that out is by reading spark plugs and looking at the fuel distribution. It may be terrible, or it may be decent. I maintain that these EFI systems in general are a needless expense. I don't think you should run out and buy one if you just have the average daily driver. I'm using this for a very specific purpose: boost. The dome light came back to life. In the first video, I indicated that I would probably be exploding the 904 push-button transmission and then replacing it with a stick. Most people seem to think that's a good idea. One viewer said that would be a bummer. And actually, I'm coming around to that way of thinking. Because for one thing, with an automatic, with a torque converter, you can pre-spool your turbo. Turbos rely on load. And in this situation, we're going to be dealing with some measurable turbo lag. A good way to reduce that lag is by using an automatic transmission with a torque converter to pre-spool. So it's probably going to stay. It may well need some improvements to survive the abuse, but we'll see. I'm open to trying new things with this car. The whole operation is new things, really. And so down the line at some point, it may well get a manual transmission after all. But I'm going to try this out. We'll see what it's like. We might even be rebuilding a 904 push button in the near future, so keep an eye out for that. At least 2 commenters told me to strip and paint the car. No. All right, back to work. I'm going to keep fiddling with the tune and see if I can get this thing leaned out at hot idle and get it to stop stalling after it fires up. Not really sure what that's about just yet. All right, I've done several things. The big one was lowering the fuel pressure. I've almost lowered it as far as it will go. After that, I got it to lean out to the point that it was somewhat happy. I was able to tweak the idle speed. I've got it to a point now where the idle valve actually does stuff. So let's see what that runs like. Yes. All right. So basically now it's a Toyota Corolla. Tuning this thing is not unlike tuning a carburetor. You're looking for best vacuum, you're looking for best fuel mixture. The difference is you're tuning it with a fuel pressure regulator and you're not tweaking mixture screws. I have got to fix this stupid controller. It's driving me nuts. It's really dumb that this thing is brand new and broken, but remember, this setup has been in boxes and kicked around in a garage or two for years now, so stuff happens. I resoldered the little daughter board to the main board and it actually works now, which is awesome. I can put this stupid controller back together. A minute ago, I said that tuning this atomic system is like tuning a carburetor, and they went to great lengths to make that happen. For example, there's a pump squirt setting and a power valve enrichment setting. Now I started pulling fuel out of this because I figured that's what it would want, and it seemed like it was going super rich when it revs up. However, the more of that I take out and the more pump squirt I take out, the worse of a hesitation it has with no load. Revving it up, it just dips like crazy. So I've added both, and it did seem to smooth it out, but again, we still have a rich condition once it revs up. I'm kind of hoping this thing will be able to tune itself, but as mentioned, I might just need to put in smaller injectors anyway. Oh, the inevitable happened. I think the gauge limiter, which is built into the fuel gauge on these things, has just recently shorted shut. This gauge used to be accurate, now it's just pegging out. That will fry that gauge and let the smoke out of it, so I probably need to unhook the voltage to that. You may have noticed this tack sitting here. That's yet another takeoff part from my 68 Charger. I'm gonna put it somewhere, maybe on the dash, maybe on the column, I don't know yet. Let's talk next steps. I still don't have a turbo, and I've yet to start on a turbo manifold. That'll come in due time, but there's a lot of stuff to handle before then. If you're gonna do anything performance-oriented with an engine, you want to make sure it's in a good state of tune and in sound mechanical condition first. A great place to start? Fresh ignition pieces. Cap and rotor. This is actually a decent quality brass contact blue streak cap. Nice. And there's a matching rotor. Spark plugs. These probably haven't been changed since like the Nixon administration, so I'm going to put a set of fresh NGK G-Power plugs in it. Those are 1 heat range colder than the factory plug. We may need to go even colder than that for turbo-based purposes, but we'll find out. Fresh spark plug wires, also a good idea. I think I actually have a set of 6 red high-performance spark plug wires somewhere in the pile, so hopefully I can dig those up. Now the Slant 6 is well known for having timing chain issues. So, mechanically sound on this engine is going to mean replacing that. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of stuff in the way, and most of that stuff I want to replace. I'm not quite ready for that just yet, so I'll be getting into that a little bit later. This is also a solid lifter engine, and that means the adjustment at the rocker arms needs to be verified too. So in furtherance of that, I need to remove the valve cover. It also leaks horribly, so I needed to remove it anyway. And while it's off, if it mysteriously becomes pretty and red, well, added bonus. You know, I could swear I'd gone through and tightened the bolts on this cover since it leaks so badly, but apparently not. You know, one commenter on the last video said that watching me work stresses them out. What do they mean? I don't understand. Ow. Ah, there we go. Come on. When I replace this belt, which it needs, remind me to get one like a 1/2 inch longer so the alternator kicks out farther so I can get the valve cover out around it. This is just dumb. Here's our first look inside the little engine that could maybe someday. Not bad. I've seen way worse. We'll probably vacuum the tree pieces out, but other than that, I'm pleased. From what I can see, the valve adjustments are actually pretty close. I'll go through and check them all. I think I was hearing one clack a little bit, so it's worth verifying. Here's a look at the spark plug tubes, or drool tubes, or whatever the heck they're called, from the inside. Isn't that interesting? Later heads don't have that, and this is actually cast like inward, kind of, to facilitate a plug. Every performance engine I've ever built for myself was Chrysler Industrial Red. I don't even know why. It just sparks joy, so I keep doing it. Another commenter on the last video said that I have a serious case of ADD. And I don't know what they mean by that, but I've got to go run to the junkyard, buy some parts for a car I don't even own yet, and then pick up a Subaru, so yeah. Oh, you poor thing. Oh, come on. Dude, I need that for the Demon. It's even original black. I used to own this. It wasn't so smashed then. This right here was the best running Slant 6 I'd ever heard. Supposedly it still does run, although some parts have been removed. I bought this truck from this junkyard. It was almost sitting in exactly the same spot. Maybe like 20, 30 feet that way. And I fired up and drove out of here, and now it's right back because the most recent owner was caught stealing wood in a national forest. Ironically, it was previously a government vehicle, which I always enjoyed. Ramp truck window pieces. I need this. Nope. If you want to build a performance Slant, these 80s engines are the one to start with. They're a little lighter weight, they have a lighter crankshaft. I'm just like straight up not having a good time. What good are the gloves if you don't wear them? And follow up, why did I not bring a coat? Yep, it's a broken Subaru. I should not have built this thing. No one man should have this much ramp truck power. Well, the good news is I fixed a Subaru lock cylinder. Don't worry about the extra pieces I left out, that's fine. The bad news is I didn't get anything else done on the Valiant. At least the valve cover looks red. Every day. Exactly the same. It's a new day, and the Valiant is in pieces right in my way, so I need to get the valve cover back on. First, though, I am going to check the valve clearances as I mentioned. A cursory search on the internet reveals that the recommended valve lash specs are 10 thou intake, 20 thou exhaust. What that means is when the cam is off lift, meaning the rocker arm is free, you should be able to perfectly fill this gap with that feeler. And it's very close. Nice. But of course, this is a 2 valve per cylinder, 6-cylinder engine, so there are 12 valves total. And given that all of these valves are timed differently, some of them are on lift, some of them are off lift, I will need to rotate the engine slightly to get each of them on the base circle of the cam so I can check that measurement. Now, there are different methods of doing that. Some people will carefully line the engine up at TDC and then turn it 45 degrees and 45 degrees and 45 degrees. That's just way too much work. So what I do is bump it over and just watch the valves one by one and ensure that they are on the base circle of the cam lobe. The way to do that, of course, watch the rocker go down, watch the rocker go all the way up, give it a few more degrees, and you're good to go. Some old schoolers like to adjust the valves with the engine idling. I've done that in the past. It's very messy and horrible. Kind of fun, but it's not usually the method I choose to go with. And do be aware that I'm doing this cold. The Slant specs that are given are for a cold engine. I've done all the exhaust valves. Number 5 was a little bit loose, maybe something like 26 thou. The rest were very, very close. Ooh, I could see a small amount of compression bubbling out around that intake valve. You know, in the future, we're definitely going to be going through this head, among other modifications. Several commenters have asked if I will do improvements to the engine. Well, yeah, of course. As I mentioned, this build is going to go in stages. Stage 1 is just getting the EFI on working and getting the state attuned to something we can start with as a baseline. From here, I plan to do a lot. I'd like to do some basic head port work. I'd like to replace the valve springs. All in good time, Reginald. Intake valves done. 4 and 5 required a little bit of adjustment, but less than number 5 exhaust. Overall, very minor. Hopefully number 5 exhaust was the one I heard clacking around and everything will be good now. This adjustment is pretty important. For one thing, by tightening those adjusters, you're increasing the lift of the valve ever so slightly. If they're too tight, though, the valves could hang open and then, well, your compression leaves and that cylinder doesn't fire. So that's not good either. You've got to get it right. With that done, I can install this now shiny red valve cover. Now you'll notice I've gooped silicone on the cover. I do that because these things are never flat anymore. I'll be sticking the classic Felpro cork gasket onto that surface, so hopefully it ends up sealed to the cover nicely. I don't silicone the bottom or head side of that gasket. I might want to be able to take this cover off in the future. In fact, I can guarantee you I will. I'd like the gasket to stick to the cover, but come right off of the head. There's the valve cover dropped in, making everything around it look much worse. But wait, I'm not quite done. Bam! Check that out. The chrome T-handles, also left over from my 68 Charger. There were only 8 of them for some reason. That just happens to be the number of valve cover bolts on a Slant 6, so there you go. We'll gloss over the fact that the threads are a little long. I'm pretty sure they need washers, which will inevitably get lost. And I definitely don't want to talk about that guy. Yet another problem a longer alternator belt will fix. It's just so good looking. I could stare at this for hours, but I've got Durango parts to sell, so let's fire this thing up and move it again. Maybe it'll cold start better now, I don't know. No. All right, well, there's more to figure out, obviously. It does idle, it just doesn't immediately idle, that's all. Oh, and I still haven't topped up the transmission. Man, this fuel pump just sounds furious all the time. Oh, that is glorious. Also, a lot of red. Tell you what, it hates all that extra fuel with a load. I still don't understand how this brake pedal does what it does. Yeah, it's kind of got a bad attitude right now. We'll get there. Good news, it is no longer pouring oil everywhere. Pump keeps shutting off. It really doesn't sound happy. I wonder if this thing's out of gas. That would be weird. It's a new day, and I think the Valiant's still broken. By which I mean, I think the Valiant's out of gas. So let's dump some gas in it. Remember that wobble in the rear end? Could be related to that. Recall I said I was going to get an EFI tank for this thing? It's only just occurred to me that those probably aren't available for early cars. The later A-body tank will physically fit in here, but the filler neck attachment is different. I think the later filler neck has a larger diameter or something. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's some horrible beige paint in the engine compartment, and for some reason, they hit everything back here with that too. The trim here is supposed to be like shiny metal, but it's beige. Through the magic of 4-aught steel wool and some cleaning spray, it's starting to look like that. Another one bites the dust. You know, I really like the red. But thanks to Evan at Rocket, we've got options now. Maybe when it's turbo time. We'll see. It's now no longer when it was, it's the future. Or maybe it's now. Anyway, the Valiant's out of gas and it's right in my way. I put in a bit of elbow grease back here the other day and it's looking a lot better. Not great, but, you know, better. I don't have a turbo yet. I don't have the EFI tank situation figured out. I don't have a lot of stuff. So we still can't make boosty noises. But I have a desire to get something, anything really, done on this car. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking if I could get all of these fancy center lines mounted on it, and the lug nuts tight, and the tank full of enough gas that it'll continue to run, then maybe I can tune it just a little bit and get it to the point that I can drive it down a road. That would be very exciting. I want to start putting miles down in this thing. I want to get it to the point that I am confident it will be fine with boost on it. And we're nowhere near that yet. I do now have a timing set with no nylon cam gear, a new intake and exhaust manifold gasket if I need it, although I need to pick up a Remflex, the water pump, which is in need of changing, And the list goes on. Oh yeah, tune-up parts. But right now, I'm out of time for major wrenching. So I need to take the path of least resistance. Let's see if we can find a win in here somewhere. What kind of cancer do you get from pouring gas all over yourself? You know what? I don't actually want to know. I could feel my skin burning. Yeah, that didn't fix it, actually. So I guess it's not out of gas. Good thing I dumped a bunch more in it and got it everywhere. The pump just sounds furious. Why am I only just now having the thought that I could have clogged that filter? You know, I could just be onto something there. I'm starting to hear colors. So why is the pre-filter full of, I don't know, activated carbon? It kind of looks like pieces of rusting filler neck or sending unit or something, but most of it's not magnetic? Okay, maybe it is. Yeah, so that's bad. Anyway, with the chunks knocked out, it runs again. Yay! Working on the other wheels now. This would be a great time to look inside the brakes. Anyway, moving on. I shouldn't have looked. I should not have looked. There is no brake material on the rear right. None. Half of it fell out, obviously, but half of it has been missing for a long, long time. Yikes. That's not even the brake I had to unseize when we got this thing. That was the rear left. Incidentally, there's an entire stack of drum brake parts in that box. All brand new, ready to go. Unfortunately, it's all for normal V8 car 10-inch brakes. And this thing has the teeny tiny bottle cap-esque 9-inch. So yeah, I guess I just don't get to fix those today. Or this. Definitely not fixing this. I think I mentioned I'm out of time, didn't I? Yeah, it's 2:30 p.m. I'm supposed to be headed to a racetrack. Not with this hunk of garbage. Anyway, I modified the leaf spring clamp with a hammer. Woo! Let's talk wheel rub. I've got some, and it's up here. It's, well, slightly on the lip here as well, but mostly here. That is an early A-body feature. The wheel tub is super tight. It's very, very close to the brake drum, and so if you don't get your wheel offset just perfect, you'll end up rubbing on the outside here. Now, this is not with a big tire either. It's a 245, whatever height it is. So simply rolling the wheel lip doesn't even fix the problem. There are a couple ways to solve it. I could just take a saw and cut the wheel opening up to there. That would work. Or I could put air shocks on this thing and jack it to the moon. Or I could put teeny tiny 215s on it. All right, we're good on the clamp for now, till I corner hard and the tire flexes into it. I'm gonna go ahead and roll the quarter lips anyway for safety with my old friend, a baseball bat. I think a wooden one would probably be better, but this is what I got. I've encountered yet another problem, and it's lug nuts. As you can see, I have quite a few. This particular combination, though, requires something special. First off, this is a centerline mag wheel. As such, it requires a shanked mag nut. There might be some mags in the world that have a taper for your standard acorn lug nut, but these do not. They just have a straight drilled hole. These are what locate the wheel, so the shank needs to be the right size. I've got a couple size shanks on hand. I do have some of the right ones, but it gets worse because this small bolt pattern, the 5-on-4 pattern, uses a 7/16 thread. It's tiny. B bodies and big bolt A bodies and just about everything else, frankly, in Mopar world anyway, uses a 1/2-inch thread. That's okay. I do have some 7/16 mag nuts in stock that just happen to be the right diameter for these wheels. Unfortunately, things get one step more complicated on a pre-71 car. You see, on these early things, the driver's side studs are reverse thread. They seem to think that would help keep them from magically backing off when you were cruising down the highway. Eventually, they figured out that did nothing. So all lug studs on Chrysler products from 71 onward are right-hand thread. This car already had mag wheels, these weird honeycomb, whatever the heck they're called things. And they just so happen to have the right diameter. But as you can see, this wheel is missing one, so I need one there. And the rear left wheel? Well, the mag is in the trunk. This thing had a steel spare on that corner, and the lug nuts for the original wheel, nowhere to be found. I was hopeful that this bag would hold the answers I seek. This is the collection of lug nuts that came from Darren with Blake's muscle car when I got those wheels in Oklahoma. Unfortunately, Darren's car was half converted to half-inch studs, and both front wheels apparently were right-hand thread. As mentioned, in 71, all of the studs were changed to right-hand thread, so I can't even come over and borrow some off the Demon. So this is kind of disappointing, but I don't think I'm going to get all 4 wheels on today. I'm going to rob the nuts off that one so I can mount the rear one. That rear left wheel is going to be the toughest to fit. For whatever reason, the axles in these cars are always shifted to the driver's side ever so slightly. So if you think I had clearance problems on the right, the clearance problems on the left are going to be awful. I want to just go ahead and jump on that grenade now. This is fine. I only need 4 back here anyway. I almost forgot to fix the leaf spring clamp first. This thing's going to be down to race weight by the time I'm done. Yikes. This is starting to look way too much like my brother's Fury. Oh, it just gets better. This one's been changed. So I only have 1 wheel's worth of backward studs. I've got entire boxes of 7/16 studs, but none with the right knurl diameter. I was wandering around the property, wondering if I have any 7 1/4 axles left, which, now that I think about it, I actually do. Anyway, then I remembered I just happen to have a broken axle shaft sitting here, and lo, the 8 3/4 and 7 1/4 use the same studs. So I'm gonna knock these out with a soft hammer and go put them in the Valiant. I actually have a special wheel stud installation tool. If only I knew where it was. There we go. It's a tool with a bearing in the back that sits against the hub. Then you put a regular tapered seat lug nut on there and run it down. Oh, that's totally working. 4 left to go. I'm sure I can manage to break one of them at least. Oh, come on. Man, someone needs to work on his aim. There's something funny about doing all this when I'm just gonna replace this rear end anyway. Yeah. I flew too close to the sun. You're definitely supposed to do this with hand tools. Anyway. Well, the good news is, as long as I don't screw up anymore, I'll be fine. Is it too early for a drink? Well, that's the danger of a used lug stud, I guess. Anyway, off to find more used lug studs. Sometime today! Turns out some grease on the knurls helps them go in nice and easy. Let us never speak of this again. I bet you thought everything was just going to go swimmingly from here on out. But I checked. I am still Jamie, and this is still Dead Dodge Garage. So, I'm critically short on washers for the mag nuts. I managed to find enough for this wheel, so that's good. I actually have a whole box of those too. But they're way too big in diameter for some reason. All right, just give it a minute, because I think this is all about to be worth it. Maybe. Yeah, it's a good look. You know, today I was supposed to do a forward brake job and then go to the drag strip with the Demon. The good news is I haven't even started on the forward brake job yet. I know I pointed out the wheel bearings on the passenger side are loose. These don't seem to be. At least, if they are, I can't tell because the brakes are half locked. Also, at least that control arm bushing is totally shot. Oh, did I mention the front wheels are on the Barracuda? All the way out there. That car is going to get the super awesome center lines at some point in the future. This ain't it, Chief. I'm getting excited again. I'm going to have a grand total of 2 lug nut washers over here. Hopefully it doesn't mind. I absolutely loved the look of these wheels on the front of the Barracuda with the nose sitting all high. And I love it on this thing too. I don't want to talk about it. Still don't want to talk about it. Right, this one constantly goes flat. Hey, the operation was a success here. Kinda. There's a whole finger width gap, at least until the suspension is compressed. or until it goes around a corner. Speaking of going around corners, maybe I shouldn't. As long as there are never any bumps, I think it'll be fine. The driver's side will not be fine. Just looks so tough though. Yeah, it's worth it, probably. Hey, don't worry, I fixed it with a hammer. How cool is this giant Valiant emblem? I gotta get some blue and red model paint and redo that. Also, the messed up behind grille blackout is driving me absolutely nuts. Almost nuts enough to fully remove the grille to fix it. Instead, I did it a way lazier way and just like shot downward behind the grille. And it mostly worked. Okay, I don't even know who I am anymore. I gotta be done with this. I should weigh all of that, right? Tony would. Magnificent. It's a thing of beauty and perfection. It's a total pile, but it looks better. Yeah, so, I'm like 100% sure that filter's clogged again. It'll run for a couple seconds at a time. It's right in the middle of the driveway. Either the filter's clogged or the pickup's like broken. It's not good. Okay, I'm not having fun anymore. I'm just gonna walk away. But then I'm gonna come back and admire how great it looks. Look how great it looks. Hey, the brake light is stuck on. Hey, it's got a brake light that works. So, as is often the case around here, it's kind of good news, bad news. The good news, it looks awesome now. And there's a fuel-injected 170 under the hood with some shiny pieces on it. I've got multiple prospects for turbos, so things are going well there. Just a few seconds staring at all this is enough to make one forget that it doesn't work. The bad news is, it's heavy. I know that because this is how I have to move it now. It's not really ideal. Also, not what I had in mind. Now, I'm not necessarily blaming MSD and their atomic system for this issue. It's probably all my fault. Again, for some reason, the gas tank is just full of garbage. But this has been my experience every single time with the frame-mounted fuel pump, with the exception of one very nice, very expensive Holley pump once. Did I mention it looks cool? I love the nose-high stance. It is absolutely perfect. Okay, it could probably come up like maybe an inch in the back, but yeah, it doesn't work. I took a Valiant that ran and moved and drifted in fields and stuff and made it be broken. Fantastic. I guess that's it for this episode. Next time we see this thing on video, I'll have this whole fuel supply thing figured out. And with any luck, I'll have a turbo in my hot little hands. Until then, as ever, thank you very much for watching. And remember, the lower your expectations, the easier it is to meet them. Oh yeah, I'm thinking somebody out there with a 3D printer needs to make up some emblems that say Signet Turbo. If that's the kind of thing that gets you excited, shoot me an email.